It's December 2024, and I want to wish everybody across the globe a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holidays. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to identify your ad networks that are best at feeding you installs that eventually become monetizers for your online business. If you look at the demo business behind me, we're looking at November 2023 installs, and we're looking at them with a leading 365 days, and we're tracking the percentage of the install cohort that becomes a monetizer segmented by the ad network. What you can tell from this analysis is that on average about 5 to 6% of install cohorts are being converted into monetizers. But the importance in this analysis is that we have a few outlier ad networks that are overperforming. We have ad network 12 and 8 that are converting about 9 to 10% of their installs into monetizers. That's a 50% increase or improvement from the average. So with this specific insight, what you can do is shift more of your marketing budget over to those two ad networks so that you can get 50% more monetizers out of your paid installs. So this is super useful and can be used as leverage to make your online business that much better. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to shift over to MySQL, and I'm going to show you how to do this so that you can apply it to your own business setting. Alright, so here we are in MySQL, and what we're going to do is start out with an installs table. So let me show you a few records out of this installs table so that you can get oriented around the data we're going to be using. Okay, so here's our installs table, and we're just going to grab a few fields. We need customer ID. We need install date. We want to make sure that these installs are coming in from a ad network, meaning you paid for these installs and they were sent over to your app or online business via one of many ad network possibilities. So we will say where attribution network is not null. So we want them to be a paid install. And then what we also want to do is we want to be able to identify the very first install for a given customer. So we will do row number over partition by, and then order by install date time. I'm going to call this install index. So what this is going to do is that if you're a customer and you have multiple installation date times, it's going to order all of those installation date times ascendingly, and it'll mark the very first install instance as 1, the second install as 2, the third install as 3. And what we're going to do is we're going to take that install index and put it in a where clause and filter it for just 1, so that we take each customer's very first install instance and the ad network that they came in on. So let's just run a few records here. And then we also want to segment this data. So let's bring in attribution name. And this will just be the ad network. And for simplicity in this demo, we're just going to call the ad networks ad network 1, 2, 3, so that we can distinguish between them. Okay. And here's just a perfect example for us to look at together, where we have the same customer ID ending in 2514, and you see that they installed twice, once in January of 2023 and then a second time in August of 2023. You can see that with our row number partition by, it assigned values of 1 and 2. So this is great because in a future where statement coming up very soon, we're just going to filter for this record, and this record is going to be dropped, the one with the assignment of 2. So I'll show you that very soon. Let's call all this data installs. So again, this is just a subselect. It's returning data, and we're just calling that subselect installs. So now we need to do 2 things. The first is to take this column, to take this field, and filter it for just 1 so that we just return each customer and the first install date. And then what we also need to do is make sure that they installed in November of 2023 to ensure that we have a full leading 12 months of data so that we can mimic the analysis that I showed earlier in this tutorial. So let's bring all the fields up here. All we need to do is just add that prefix. Let's call this, it's coming from the install subselect. So that's what this prefix is for. I'm going to do this. So really, we don't need this install index field up here. We do need it in the where clause. So let's copy this. And then we'll drag it down, say where that install index from that previous row number has to equal 1. And then what we need to do is make sure that these installs happened at least 12 months ago so that we have enough leading data to calculate the percentage of that install cohort segmented by ad network that become a monetizer over time. And by over time, I mean a leading 365 days from install. So that's that days since install x-axis. Okay, so what we are going to do is this. We need to take the install date and we need to reformat this and say whatever the install date is, we want it to be the first of the month. And then what we want to do is this. We're going to take the current date, which is December 27th, 2024, and we're going to reset that to the first of the month, which is going to be December 1st, 2024. And we're going to do that following exactly what we just did. So we will do this. And then we will do this right here. And then interestingly, this value right now is December 1st, 2024, but we actually want it to be November 1st, 2023. So let's do that. We'll do a date add, and then we'll do an interval -13 month, right? So what this is effectively saying is this person had the first install date right here based on whatever the value is in this field or column. But what we want to make sure of is take their install date, convert it to the first of the month, and make sure it equals November of 2023 so that we have at least 12 months of leading data to fulfill our analysis. Okay. So let's run a couple records now. And then if we look at the data that was output, you'll notice that these are all installs from November of 2023. That's fantastic. And then they all have different ad networks. Okay. So we're doing pretty good. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to wrap all of this into another subselect, and we can call it installs November. That's fine. Let's just bring all of the columns up here. Bring in the customer ID. We're going to bring in the install date. Bring in the attribution name. And we are ready for our next step. So the next thing we need to do is we have installs from November of 2023. And what we want to do is from their install date, we want to bring across all leading dates. So the leading 12 months of dates, so that for each install and for each leading date, we can check to see, have they become a monetizer yet? So let's do that now. In this relational database, we do have a dim date table, and it's just a table that has a column of dates that we're going to use. So we'll do this, and it's called dim date. And I will show you what this looks like. All right. So let me scroll out so you can see this entire query. And again, this SQL query along with the Excel workbook are going to be available as MySQL and Excel practice files. Okay, so now what we're going to do is for each customer and their very first install date, which happened in November of 2023, we're going to bring across all dates that are greater than or equal to that install date so that we get that nice leading 12 months of dates. So we will do this by doing a left join over to this dim date table. We're going to call this dates, and we'll do it simply on dates. Date, right, referencing this date column, is greater than or equal to the installs November dot install date. And then we will bring across all of these leading dates. And let's move the attribution name just next to the customer ID. I think visually that's just more helpful. And let's do an order by. We will do an order by so I can show you what this data looks like after the join. So again, this is an expansion or an expansive join where it takes one record and it expands those records because it's bringing across all dates that are greater than or equal to the install date. Okay, so let's fix a slight issue here. Install Novem needs to be installs Novem, and now we should be ready to go. Okay, wonderful. So in our first example, we have a customer ID ending in 536 with an install date of November 23rd, 2023 with an ad network of 17. And as you can see, all the leading dates came across. Any dates that are greater than or equal to November 23rd, 2023 were brought across, beginning with the exact same date as the install date, and then increasing to the 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th, up through the present date, which is December 27th, 2024. So let's go ahead and work on the next step together, which is what we need to do is for each of these leading dates, we need to figure out if this install has become a monetizer. So for that, we're going to go to our revenue table. So let's go ahead and clean this up a little bit. We will get rid of this order by because we don't need it. That was just for our own edification to check the data. So we will remove that. Everything looks good. So let's just go ahead and wrap this. And we can call it install dates. Or, you know, just call it leading dates. So as we always do, let's just bring across the fields of data that we need from the previous subselect. So we will grab this stuff. We just need to change the prefix out. We will take this and just copy it here. And now we kind of have a side project that we're going to engage in a little bit. We do have a revenue table, so we will go here and we will look at our revenue data, and then we will change it slightly so that we can bring it across to our installs with the leading dates. So our revenue table is fact player revenue. Okay, wonderful. So this is just our revenue transaction table by customer. So all we need to do is with this table, we just need to go with purchase date, and then we can just do min here. And then we can just call this min purchase date. And then we're going to group this by the customer. Wonderful. And then we're going to wrap this into a subselect. And we can call this purchases. Now what we're going to do is we're going to join this with this revenue data, or the very first purchase date per customer. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a left join. We're going to say on leading dates dot customer ID equals purchases dot customer ID. And then here comes the fun part, and purchases dot min purchase date has to be less than or equal to the leading date value. So not the install date, but the leading date value, because this is what we're checking, right? Did a customer's first purchase happen on or before the leading date value? And we will put that in a case statement up here. We'll say case when this is not null, then 1, else 0 end. And we can simply call this purchase flag. And I'm going to show you with a customer example how this logic works. But again, what we're doing is we're joining on the customer ID, and we're saying, was this customer's purchase date or first purchase date less than or equal to the value in the leading date field? Meaning if someone installed, call it December 1st, 2024, and they made their first purchase December 5th, 2024, then that would mean for the leading date values of December 5th, December 6th, December 7th, this column would be 1, but any time prior to that, the value would be 0. So let's run this to make sure it works, and then we will go through a customer example. Great, so we have our customer, their install date, all of the leading dates that are equal to or greater than the install date, and then whether or not by that leading date they are a purchaser. So let's look at a specific customer. We'll say where leading dates dot customer ID equals this, and then let's do some ordering. Because I want to show you this in action. This is a fantastic example. So we have a customer ending in 3000 coming in on ad network 14. So this is a paid install channel, and they installed on November 18, 2023. And what we know is with our leading date logic, we're going to have dates that are equal to November 18, 2023 going forward, going to November 19th, the 20th, the 21st. And you'll notice that the purchase flag is 0, and then it switches to 1 on November 28th, 2023, meaning they installed your mobile game, and for the first week or so they didn't buy at all, and then boom, on November 28, 2023 they purchased. So that means from November 28, 2023 we're considering them a purchaser, meaning from this date going forward, so 28th, 29th, 30th, and all future dates up through the present, we're considering them a monetizer. So this is happening for our entire data set, so that's fantastic. Okay, so let's clean this up a little bit and then aggregate the data and move it over to Excel. So we don't need these order bys anymore. We can remove this customer ID example, and we can be certain that this case statement logic works. So very cool. We're going to call this ag. And to build that chart, what we need to do is think about, okay, what's on the x-axis? The x-axis is going to have days since install, right? So that's going to be a date diff, right, between the leading date and the install date. We're going to call this days since install, and we're just going to do a count, right? This is just going to be a count of installs. And then we just want a summation of monetizers. So we're just going to take this field and just sum it. We just call this monetizers. And then here's where the strategy comes in, and that's in the segmentation. So we're going to bring across the attribution name. So we're going to call this, give it the right prefix. And then all we need to do is do a group by. So take this, put it right here. And then let's put a semicolon there to mark that we've completed this. And let's just call this attribution network. Okay, I think we are ready to run our final query. So this is pretty good. We've got everything here. Let's go ahead and run it. Fantastic. So here is our final data set. Now let's go over to Excel and finish up this analysis. Okay, so here we are in Excel. We have days since install, the ad network, the count of installs, and then the count of monetizers by days since install. So let's just add a new field here and call it % install cohort monetizer. And then we will just take the number of monetizers divided by the number of installs. Okay, that's pretty great. So we'll do this, and then we will turn it into a percentage. And now all we need to do is transform this data a little bit in a pivot table, and then create our final chart. Okay, so let's put days since install on the rows. And then we will put the attribution name here across the top, and then % install cohort monetizer. We want a summation of that. Let's do a little bit of label filtering. We'll just say less than or equal to 365. We just want to look at the leading 365 days for these installs that installed in November of 2023. Okay, now what we want to do is let's make sure we remove grand totals. So we will remove that stuff, and then with these values, let's just turn them into percentages like so. Give it a little more readability. Okay, I think we are generally ready for this. Okay. So here is our final chart that's being outputted. Let's move these ad networks down to the bottom so that we can see a slightly better visual. But again, I think this is a really fantastic analysis because what you can do with this information is be far more strategic with your user acquisition budget or your marketing budget. So again, what we did is we looked at November 2023 installs, and we looked at the leading 12 months or leading 365 days. And then segmented by ad network, we looked at the percentage of those installs who over time became monetizers. So what we see is a lot of strategy popping out of this analysis. The first part is that, on average, most ad networks are converting about, 6% of their installs into monetizers. But what we see, or what pops out to us, is we have two outlier ad networks, ad network 12 and ad network 8, that are doing almost 50% better than the average in converting their installs into monetizers. So with this information, what we can do is we can reallocate our marketing budget to ad networks 12 and to 8, so that more of our DAU or digital audience becomes a monetizer. So again, this has been a awesome tutorial for me. I hope it's been a good one for you, and I hope that with this knowledge you can apply it to your own business setting. Hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you very much for joining.